Nicolas Bérubé is a journalist for Presse, and he's the author of the new book, From Zero to Millionaire, and he joins us on the line. Nicolas, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Elias.
First things first, you released the book in French. It turns out to be a huge success, and now you get to release it translated to English. Just tell me about that. How good does it feel that your book was so successful, it's now getting other languages?
Well, it's pretty surreal, to be honest. I mean, I'm used to, using sources in English. I read most of the material I read is in English and comes from the U.S., English, Canada, and Europe, and it's a bit surreal to be able to contribute back to, the global discourse and the global about knowledge about investing. So yeah, I'm super happy about that.
So From Zero to Millionaire, and the subheadline on the book, a simple, effective, and stress-free way to invest in the stock market. So, Nicolas, let's talk about it. How easy is it to go from $0 to millionaire level dollars?
Well, if you're a good investor, it can be done like in half maybe your career, or people in their 40s that have started young can cross this threshold, if they invest a part of their income along the way. But the whole thing is, stock market. Sometimes it's scary for people. They see it as a big casino, or maybe they had a friend or a relative that had a bad experience back in the days with Nortel or any other thing. So I found that there's a lot of myth surrounding that. On the other hand, we see figures like Warren Buffett, who, he doesn't look like a gambler. He doesn't look like a guy who's trying to get rich quickly. So I wanted to take the lessons from, the good investors and pass them on to regular folks who maybe didn't learn about it in school, or maybe their parents didn't gave them all the I know my parents didn't know anything about the stock market. So I think there's a big gap in knowledge, and that's why I'm trying to do with this book.
Zero education for teenagers, for people in school. There's zero education on this kind of thing. Now, Nicolas, I got to be very honest there. I feel like I'm being called out here because you just said Nortel. Let me give you a true story. So in the early 2000s, I worked for the Expos. Last 3 years, the Expos were in town. And I had a colleague, he was doing group ticket sales. And, Expos didn't have a lot of group ticket sales. So he spent a lot of his time on the stock market, that kind of thing. And he gave me a hot tip, 2002. I'll never forget this. He goes, Elias, you should get in the stock market. You should buy Nortel. And I'm 22 years old. I've never bought a stock in my entire life. And I go and I sign up for an online account, which is, traditional desktop in those days, no apps, that kind of thing. I sign up for an account online and I bought $1,000 of Nortel stock, which went to $0. And so that's my entry into the stock market, is losing $1,000 being 21, 22 years old. You start off with your mistakes. So let's go to your mistake here, because everyone makes mistakes. Tell us about your mistake and that led you to not investing for a decade.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very common to lose money early on. I know I did when I was about 30 years old. I was living in LA at the time. I was the U.S. correspondent for La Presse, and there was this big crash in the U.S. stock market. People remember 2008, 2009, all this fun times where, people were losing their house, their job. And I noticed that the stock market rebounded very, very quickly. It was, I think in 2010, it had rebounded by something like 60%. And around me, there was foreclosures and shops were closing down. And I was like, whoa, there's no way this is real, like this rebound thing. So I shorted the market. So shorting the market is basically buying a financial product that will gain in value if the stock market crashes. So I was expecting like another crash even deeper than the one we had known in 2008, 2009. And I invested around $10,000, which was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money for me. So it was not a pleasant experience. As you mentioned, I lost it in a couple of months. Wow. And, I see this as a price of admission in a way to, be a better investor and learn. And your story is so interesting with Nortel. Every generation has its Nortel. A few years ago, it was maybe people will remember. It was the mania, the cannabis and marijuana stock. Everywhere you went, people had a neighbor or friend that made 10x their money very quickly. So, it's just the nature of the beast. Stock market, it brings a lot of this notion of easy money, of getting rich quick, and this is the notion that we all fall for. But if I see stock market as the electricity. You can use the electricity to power your house. We all do, but electricity can be very dangerous and deadly. So to me, that's the stock market. If you use it the right way, it's very convenient and it works for you. And if you use it the wrong way, if you're trying, let's say, stock picking or get rich quick, then you get a shock. So it's just the way you approach it.
So you had to dabble in gambling. If you're shorting the market, you're doing a little bit of stock market gambling, but but that lesson. And like for me, I never made a mistake like Nortel ever again because I got a hard lesson on that. But for that lesson, that leads you down a different path, using the stock market, I guess, in a much more responsible way. Let's get into that. What was the lesson you learned from that, from shorting the market?
Well, first of all, it's we always think that the approach to have good results in the stock market is to find the needle in the haystack, right? So what's the next Google? What's the next Facebook? Can I get in on that? But that's the wrong approach. What you should do, and what I did, is you should buy the whole haystack, and there will be a few needles in there, and that's all you need to know. So if you buy the whole market, and you can do that using products that are called index funds or ETFs, you basically have the whole economy in the palm of your hand. And what does that look like? Well, historically, people don't know that, but historically, stock markets in developed countries, you're looking at somewhere between 9 and 11% return on your money on average. We all know there's very few years where there's 11 or 9% return. It's mostly all over the place. Sometimes you get 35%, sometimes you get minus 25 and all that. But if you are able to capture, the growth of the stock market in the long term, you get pretty nice return. You can double your money, in a couple of years. I'm not, promising anything like that, but historically that has been the case. And so, if you can bypass stock picking altogether and just buy the whole market, and that's why I'm saying in that book, you can get way better results. You can sleep at night. You can stop reading, financial reports from companies you might be interested on in the weekend. So I tell people my investment takes less than 1 hour a year to manage. Really, it's very, very easy, very hands off, and the results are very good.
All right, continuing our discussion with author Nicolas Bérubé. He's a journalist for Presse, and he's also just released his book From Zero to Millionaire in English. Nicolas, thanks for sticking around here. And I took particular interest to the part of your book where you talk about how very smart people, doctors and lawyers and dentists, are often so bad at investing and becoming wealthy. Why is that?
Yes, well, it's interesting that you noticed that, because that's one of the most interesting parts for me of the book, because we would think that high IQ and big income will translate to good investment results, which is actually not the case. A lot of people think that because they are successful in one domain, that gives them the knowledge to just, figure it out and find a few good companies that will make them rich. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And sometimes also these people have maybe a big gambling mentality. Let's say, if I, put aside, 5% of my income and I buy those 3 or 4 biotech companies, well, that will fund my retirement, right? No, that's not how it works. So you have a lot of, or they think that they will find the right person to manage their investment for them. Like when you're playing golf, you should meet my guy, he's so good. And well, yeah, these people are great at, selling you funds that have done great, in the past 5 years, but those are maybe not the funds that will do great in the next 5 years. So it's always a matter of finding, balance in your investment. So that's why I think it's so interesting.
And give us the data here to back up your case that just investing in a broad indexed fund will, for the most, statistically much more likely to do better than someone picking stocks individually.
Yeah. So if we look at professional stock pickers, those will be the people managing mutual funds, right? If we look at Canada, there's this SPIVA study that's published 2 times a year, and the SPIVA people look at how the mutual funds are doing compared to their benchmark. And if you look just for 1 year, it's about 50-50. But if you look in the future a little bit more, you see that most mutual fund managers cannot not even beat the market, but cannot just capture the return of the market. And if you look at a horizon of 20 years, 95% of them underperform the market. It's very, very hard to beat the market. Of course, if I have a portfolio of 70 funds, well, there'll be 5 or 6 that will have beaten the market over the last year or two, but those are not the ones that statistically will continue doing so. Mm-hmm. And very few people know that, if you look at the world stock market all over the world, the percentage of stocks responsible for 100% of the growth is less than 4%. So if you don't have that 4% in your portfolio, you're going nowhere. And of course, it's very easy to identify, the 4% that have worked, over the last 10 or 20 years. But we know that every time you take a snapshot of the best companies of an era, well, you had Sears for a while and you had GE for a while, right? Those are they're not around anymore. So if you own a broad market portfolio of index funds, you're sure to have the next Apple, the next Google, the next Facebook. They'll be in your fund, and you'll have those 4% of companies that will hopefully deliver growth. So it's a very hands-off approach. It's a very low-stress approach, and I think there's this notion that those are for little investors. If you have a few $1,000s, you can do that. But as soon as you're talking real money, you need a guy who will do stock picking for you and all that. But statistically, it doesn't work like that. So that's
Yeah, and Nicolas, also a story from my 20s, starting off investing and buying those mutual funds from the bank with lots of fees. How important are fees here? How important are getting rid of some of the higher end fee structures to becoming a millionaire?
They're massive. I always say paying high fees is trying to run a marathon in ski boots. You might do it, but it's so complicated and it will drag you down. And if you walk into a bank this morning and you say, I want to invest, well, they're going to put you in high fees mutual funds. That's just the way it always was. Banks are somehow reluctant to sell index funds for the most part because index funds will typically come with fees that are about 0.2% of your assets. Okay, in Canada, the average mutual fund fee and investment fees are about 1.75 to 2%. So it's very hard to increase your wealth if you pay 2% of your money every year. And on top of that, most people want a very balanced and a conservative, portfolio. They don't want to see, when the market drops, they hate seeing that they quote unquote lose money. So they tend to be invested very conservatively. So, if you lose 2% in fees and inflation takes 2 or 3%, you're at 5%. So if you don't make a 5% return, you're basically losing money. And very few people realize that. The industry is, they won't tell you, how much you pay in fee. Very, very prominently. They typically bury it in the report that they send in December. So if people look at their investment report in December, they can find the fees. But there's all these new products that are available that are very safe, very liquid, and I think more people could benefit from having these products.
Let's talk about my favorite subject, tax evasion. I mean, tax avoidance, because it's not evasion if it's legal. How does that play into things here? What do Canadians need to know when it comes to tax avoidance so that they can become a millionaire faster?
Well, they should definitely take advantage of every law that allows us to grow money tax free. The TFSA in Canada is obviously the biggest one. You can put away $6,500 as of this year. Every year you can invest that amount in a TFSA, and unfortunately, numbers show that Canadians are investing in very, very safe and boring investments in their TFSA, like GICs, which they're giving you a little bit more money now than they used to, but basically the TFSA should be the Lamborghini of your investment portfolio, because every dollar of growth that you'll get out of this account in the future will be tax free. So that should definitely be for most people the account that they look at when they invest. There's always also the education account that people can set up for their child, and the government will give you an additional $500 on if you max the yearly contribution of $2,500 per year per child. And so the growth of that account can be attributed to the child when the child turns 18 and starts his post-high school studies. So the growth will be taxed in the hand of the child, and if the child doesn't make a lot of money, that's basically tax-free. So there's all these ways of making money, and also just investing. People sometimes write to me and say, "Oh, my TFSA is maxed, my RSP is maxed, and I don't know what to do." Well, just having an investment account, okay, no special tax treatment. Well, people forget that all the growth that you'll get in that account, it's only 50% of that growth that will end up being taxed. If you go to your job, 100% of your income is taxed. Yeah. Okay, so that's already. Yep. That's not nothing right there. People forget that, and it's always also only the growth that's taxable, right? So, and also you can decide. You can decide when you sell your investments. You don't have to sell all at once, so the tax bill can be lower that way. So there's all these ways of just growing your money over time.
Nicolas, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for coming on the program. Great discussion.
Thanks, Elias, for having me.
Nicolas Bérubé is the author of From Zero to Millionaire, a simple, effective, and stress-free way to invest in the stock market.